as government, we are continually raising investment. We now have an investment target of $100 billion US dollars over the next 5 years. So we have had we continue to have intensive engagements with businesses and with business formations to try and understand what are the key investments that they have been looking at, where there are significant blockages or challenges, and working with them in a fair, transparent way to try to resolve those challenges. I think that's the most important part, in that it's not necessarily about starting things from scratch, but trying to understand what has prevented and has depressed investment levels to the level that they are, and what can we do to unlock it. We also have a team of investment envoys who are supporting the investment mobilization machinery in government, the likes of Invest SA, development finance institutions, government departments. They're complementing their efforts to work towards an investment conference in October this year, where we would have taken a few investors along, and we are able to announce some key investments that are going to set the tone for the next 5 years in terms of the investment mobilization drive. The other thing that we're doing is that we understand that to unlock investment, you also have to fix some key policy areas. So the National Planning Commission, for instance, has been advising us on what those priorities can be. The economic cluster ministers in government are going to go through a process where they prioritize in terms of how do we ensure that those high-impact interventions are set in motion so that we're able to achieve that target. We're going to have a job summit later this year where we're also going to tap into business, labor, community to get their ideas and their commitment as to what they can also do on their side, given what government will also be doing to unlock investments.
Now, government will not obviously achieve this alone. How do you plan on getting local business to lead the charge as well?
So local business has to lead the charge. As I mentioned, they have continuously raised their concerns about the investment climate and those things that are blocking investment. Ours is to ensure that the most compelling constraints are tackled so that they are comfortable that the investments that they make will yield a return. It's not as if investment is not happening. I mean, you would have seen just this week, Old Mutual is coming back home. It's relisting in South Africa. Mercedes-Benz is expanding its plant in East London to the tune of 10 billion rand. So we need to just ensure that we embed and enhance those kinds of activities so that more businesses are able to be confident to take such decisions and know that the economy will support them.
Now, political stability is another major issue and concern, especially with policy changes and uncertainty, with issues like land expropriation without compensation, for example, coming to the fore and discussion of South Africa at this moment. Won't these issues deter investment, and how do you plan on avoiding all of this?
So, by having formal and transparent processes. So if you look at the land reform, it's not as if it's a scattered conversation where people are fighting and there's fiery rhetoric. There's actually a parliamentary process where people are making submissions formally. There are also public hearings. And then those will be deliberated upon in the People's Parliament in an open and transparent way. And so in that sense, we are re-establishing the idea that there's rule of law and that there are institutions that are able to mediate these conflicts in society. It just doesn't happen in the streets out there. And there's also been a very clear message that things like illegal occupations of land are exactly that, illegal, and will be tackled. And then there's a formal process to actually deal, a process that respects people's dignity to have to be heard in a proper institution rather than trying to do it in other means. And that's the message we're giving to investors, that this is the legal process that is being followed, and everything else will be dealt with if it's criminal, for the criminality that it is.
And then besides this plan and charge of getting in $100 billion worth of investments over the next 5 years, what are the plans for South Africa's economy to get it going again?
So the main issue is the revitalization of the economy. You're already seeing various aspects, because I mean a lot of it actually has to be dealing with institutions and governance, which are not necessarily very economic issues. But if your institutions, if your state-owned institutions, for instance, that are responsible for the bulk of the infrastructure that makes business happen, are not in a good place, you have a problem. And so you'll see the SOC reforms and the governance improvements coming into place. You will see a lot of the outstanding issues, such as the mining charter, where there are formal processes for people to then have their input into resolving that. You will see this across a wide range, a particular range of policy issues, which are the most binding policy impediments. And this is why the Job Summit process, for instance, is very important, because it gets us to prioritize and to speak to a common narrative. And I think that is the most important part of it all. We are resource constrained, and we have to ensure that the interventions we go for are the most high impact, but also have the buy-in of all of society, which is why these convening platforms are very important.